heard from their father. And who is their father? Well, look down at verse 44. Who does he say their father is? It's the devil. The same way that Jesus had his conduct proved his father was God, the conduct of Jesus' enemies proved that their father was not God, but was actually the devil. Don't you find that sometimes when you talk to someone, they say, yes, I'm a believer, yes, I'm a Christian, and you get to know them for a little while and you find out where their conduct is not fitting of that claim. In fact, they're acting like the opposite of what they're saying. And then you begin to kind of scratch your head and you say, wait a minute. Your claim is really empty. Your claim doesn't seem to mean very much because you're saying this, that you know God, that you love God, that you have given your life to God, that you are a follower of Christ, but on the other hand, the reality is that you seem to be serving another God. The very deeds of your life do not match your claim. Look over at Philippians with me for just a moment. Listen to how Paul described these false teachers. I'm sorry, it's not Philippians, it's Titus. Go to Titus. It's Titus 1:16. He says, they profess to know God, but by their deeds they deny Him. Isn't that really the issue? You meet so many people that profess to know Him, but their deeds deny Him. And like I said last week, that's when my mom was talking to my neighbor after I gave my life to Christ 25 years ago, and she really made a very monumental statement to my neighbor, time will tell. Because it takes time to see if there's any fruit in a person's life. I mean, fruit should be evident from the very beginning, but if you don't know this person very well, it's going to take a little bit of time to see it, right? I mean, they may be manifesting what may appear to be fruit, but all it is artificial. It's not real. I mean, we know what artificial is. Some of us had real trees for Christmas. Some of us had artificial trees that looked like the real thing. And that's what happens in a false believer's life. They can carry the Bible. They can use all the terminology, but they can be lost. They can sound like a Christian should sound. So it may take a little while to look and to see that. But he says here, they profess to know God. Here he's talking about these false teachers, but by their deeds they deny Him, being detestable and disobedient and worthless for any good deed. You examine their deeds, they're worthless. They're not good deeds. This is bad fruit off a bad tree. Well, again, they were proving their conduct by the way that they were acting. Again, you got to go back to what we were talking about last time in verse 30. You can't just go with the assumption that when someone says, I believe, then boom, that marks it. They're sealed. Because Jesus is showing to us, as well as the Apostle John in recording the narrative here, that the opposite was actually true, because this group right here wanted to kill Jesus. And you can't tell me for a second that you're a Christian if you want to kill Jesus. Right? You can't tell me also that if you're a Christian that you don't want to hear His word, that you reject it, that you refuse it. D.A. Carson again observes that the Jews are falsely claiming Abraham as their father. Jesus is rightly claiming God as his. He is passing on what he has seen in his father's presence. That is, he always acts just like the father. His conduct displays his true paternity. Sadly, the same is true of the Jews. They do what they have heard from their father, only they have not yet grasped that Jesus is referring to the devil himself. You see down in verse 39, it shows that they didn't hear what he just said because they insisted that Abraham was their father. And now we see here by Jesus' response in verse 39, he shatters their claim to be Abraham's spiritual children. Yes, they were his physical children, but notice now they're trying to claim that they're his spiritual children, and he shatters that claim as well. Look at verse 39. If you are Abraham's children, do the deeds of Abraham. But as it is, you are seeking to kill me, a man who has told you the truth, which I heard from God. This Abraham did not do. You are doing the deeds of your father. Now, if you'll notice there, he keeps saying that you're doing the deeds of your father, and he doesn't say it as clearly until you get down to verse 44. See, the fact that they insisted that they were Abraham's children shows that they did not even grasp what Jesus was saying. They bitterly insisted that they were Abraham's spiritual children, so Jesus challenges them. If you are Abraham's children, then do the deeds of Abraham. Like William MacDonald says, usually children look, walk, and talk like their parents, but not so with these Jews. Their lives were the opposite of Abraham's, and though descendants of Abraham according to the flesh, yet morally they were children of the devil. If you are a child of God, you will act like your father. People will see that. They will hear that. It will be evident. I mean, I've got little babies again in my life, and reminded of how that they mimic everything you do, mimic everything you say. And we're all the time going, we got to watch what we say because they're going to repeat it. That's why Chuck Swindoll said children are they're God's spies. They tell on you, don't they? They repeat what you say. So you don't repeat something around them that you don't want repeated. So again, if you are Abraham's children, do the deeds of Abraham. Here, Abraham, when you look at his life, you see he obeyed God. He followed his requirements. He followed his commandments. He followed the decrees and the laws. And I think even the ultimate test for him in Genesis chapter 22, when he was told by God to go up to Mount Moriah and do what? To offer Isaac as a sacrifice on an altar. And he woke up early that morning, saddled his donkey, and he started heading in that direction. You heard me say this before, and you probably agree with me. I think that morning I would have slept in. But he didn't. He got up early. And talk about following in the path of obedience. He took off right in that direction. All the way to the point of laying his son there on the altar and pulling back the knife to plunge it into his son. And God stops him. And what did the angel say? Now I know that you fear God. It's the test in our life that prove that we love God. You could say it all day long, you love God, but let's see if you really love Him when you go through the trials of life. When you go through some of those testings in your life that you just can't imagine that you're going to make it through it. That they're so difficult, they're so bearing. And that's exactly what the test was. Did he love God more than he loved his only son? And of course, that whole chapter gives us the picture of God loving us so much to give his son. Well, Abraham, if you follow in the book of Hebrews, he's looked at as an example to follow. But Jesus' opponents were nothing like Abraham. They were self-righteous. They were trying to earn favor with God by their good works. And salvation is certainly not based on any kind of legalistic effort. It's not based on any religious affiliation. And it's certainly not based on your ethnic background. It's not based on any of those things. You remember we've looked at Philippians 3 so many times where Paul, he once based his salvation on his background. And what did he come to in the conclusion when he met Christ on the road to Damascus? All these things that he put his trust in, he now counted them as rubbish so that he may gain Christ. He stopped putting his hope in those things. Folks, don't trust in anything but Jesus. You know, like we were looking at Wednesday night in our first look at the subject of justification, where God, because of faith in Jesus Christ and because of the work of Jesus Christ on the cross on our behalf, dying as a substitution for our sins, God can look at us and declare us righteous. He can make that legal declaration. He can give the verdict, not guilty. Why? Because all of our sin was transferred to Jesus. He paid the ultimate price for us. And the moment that you believe, you are given the righteousness of Christ. You are clothed in the righteousness of Christ. And that's what Paul realized. He was trusting in the law. He was trusting in his heritage. He was trusting in all of these things that he did.